Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon session with the Youth Endowment Fund. I'm Caleb Jackson, and we're here to talk to you about our new grant round positive activities. Just to let you know, as is due course, we're recording at the moment. So if you don't want to be seen, do switch your camera off. And this is for the purposes of there is a lot of information here. You probably want to be able to come back and find out what it is we actually said when the door or the kids were screaming. So not a problem at all. Alongside me, I have a couple of colleagues who would just quickly say hello, who are going to help pilot this grant round opportunity with me. I'll kick off with Tanya. Tanya, do you want to say hello and what your role is?
Hi everyone, thanks very much for joining us. I'm Tanya Clark, I'm a Senior Evaluation Manager here at YEF, and I'm really excited to be leading on the evaluation side of things for this grant round. I'll pass over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Tanya. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Fullock. If I've not met you before, I'm Head of Programmes at the Youth Endowment Fund. I'm stepping in for the grant round lead from the programme side, who happens to be Beth, but I'm also supporting Beth, so delighted to be here today.
Excellent. And Kaylin.
Hi, I'm Kaylin Toms, and I am the Programme and Evaluation Officer at YEF, part of the operations team. So I'm just here to support with the meeting, and hopefully in the future I might encounter a couple of you along the way.
Excellent. So again, a good afternoon and welcome. I hope it is kind of sunny where you are and you've had the most of the day, although there has been some chill factor along the way as well. So let's kick into some slides and talk you through what the opportunity is and give you a bit more of an overview as to what we're expecting to find, what does that look like? And along the way, different different colleagues will be different departments will be talking through the slide deck, so you're well informed. Please do ask questions. If your questions are, it would be great if your questions link to the area we're talking about, because sometimes what happens is people ask questions quite rightly because we've not said anything about a particular area, but it's not until much later that we might tackle it. So if it doesn't quite fit where we've just spoken to, just hold on to them. There will be a Q&A session near the end. So with that said and done, let's tune in to our slide deck, which I can say I am now versatile with these days. All right, so as a kickoff, welcome everybody. I'm Caleb Jackson, Head of Change for Youth and Criminal Justice, and we're here to talk to you about positive activities. We've done a round of introductions, and just to tell you a bit more about us, we're a charity that was founded back in 2019 for a 10-year period with a £200 million endowment. And we're here to talk about and to find what works to prevent children and young people becoming involved in violence. And effectively, our strategy, our mission is to find what works and then build a movement to put the knowledge of what worked into practice. And that's really well articulated on this page. These are our focus areas. These are areas that people have told us. We spoke to thousands of frontline practitioners, service leaders, policy leaders, and said, where should we focus our energies and efforts? And this is the 8 that came out. And you'll see there, number 8, positive activities, which we'll talk about today. You'll see here also that we've got these 3 different neutrally coloured boxes. I won't talk too much about them, but it's important that you get the chance to watch a video, which I'll talk to you about, which is on the website and available for you and as accessible to you, which will talk to you more, covering and giving an overview as to how we function to live out our mission through our strategy. But effectively, it comes down to 3 things. YEF will fund good work, we will find what works, and then we'll work for change. And that work for change bit is really important because often we say no to a lot of people, but at the summary and at the end of our work and our tenure as a fund, we're hoping that we've built up the evidence base to support good practices that work for children. That's our promise to children, and that's who is our main client here. So you're here today because, one, you're going to help us support to achieve our mission, and we need to work with a number of you who will be successful in your application. And so what we'll do today is we'll outline what we're looking to fund, being really clear on the scope. We'll talk more about that. We'll also share with you the approach to evaluation, which is really important. If we're going to work for change, we need the best robust evidence to be able to rally and lobby and commit other people, decision makers and practitioners and many other people within the sectors that we serve, to have the best available evidence to help children, because our promise is to children. And then lastly, the third one is you'll hear more about the application process. What does that look like? What sort of things are we looking for? If you're new to us, it will give you a good insight, and colleagues will talk to you a bit more about the guidance which sits alongside the application. And then most importantly, we'll answer your questions. And no question is a silly question. We want you to go away knowing that you have everything you need to be able to tackle the application. I mentioned to you about, I won't talk too much about the strategy slides and what's behind it. In this video slide deck that is available on the webpage, you'll see here that we've done I think 18 minutes and 31 seconds, something like that, summary of the background to positive activities, where it came from, who we spoke to. We speak to a lot of people in order to get to the concise summary in order to understand what we might fund in each round, and all the information is sat within that and who's that handsome fellow there. So please do have a read and a listen, and hopefully that will give you some great background, a summary to why we're funding positive activities. With that said, here's the question we're aiming to answer. It's a bit of a mouthful, so bear with us, but I will read this out just for accuracy. Do positive activities, which are defined as sport, arts, and wilderness and adventure activities, lead to improve violent offending outcomes for children and young people, primarily aged 10 to 18, who are at high risk of being affected by violence, offending, and/or exploitation? So that's what we're seeking to answer. And all the other activity that will sit within this grant round is to help us answer this. We want to be able to definitively do that. And in terms of the definition of positive activities, it's important that we frame what we're talking about in order to attract the right types of applicants to come and work with us. And so these activities are in the brackets of sport, arts, wilderness, and adventure therapies, and they can either be delivered as standalone, which is or they can be used as a hook. Whoops, we jumped. It can be used as a hook. So standalone means that it's being delivered with a set of workers reaching a set of young people, and colleagues will talk to you more about that. Or it can be a hook into a service, such as, okay, here's sports, but you're going to get therapy too alongside, or here's some skill development that we've allayed, like, so that you can develop yourself whilst you're attending our provision. And it must be clearly structured, delivered consistently and regularly, and facilitated by appropriately trained practitioners. It's really important to ensure that whoever it is working with the children are top quality, top notch for children. And these activities must deliver primarily to the ages 10 to 18. So you're going to hear that a few times, and focus primarily on reducing violent offending behaviours. This is because that becomes measurable on impact towards violence, and that's one of our primary objectives here as a fund. But the key thing here is, and there's loads of words on this page, things like the guidance notices will reiterate some of this, but you're going to get these slide decks, so you can always come back and check in at any point in time. So just very quickly, what does the evidence say? What do we know about positive activities and violence prevention? Well, in sports, we define it as a physical activity, first of all, with social, physical, and mental benefits. And what the evidence say at the moment is that there's potential high impact on crime and violence. And you will see this when you go on our toolkit. And at the moment, we're going to use this opportunity to build up and further support or confirm the rating we've given it in the toolkit. Around the arts, it's currently limited in terms of the evidence. So this is a great opportunity to test and see whether the arts, which includes, music making, which includes, the music studios, of which we've heard many about, doing wonderful things in our communities, creative writing, poetry, photography, and much more. And how does that make an impact on youth violence. Now, on reoffending, the key thing here is that there isn't much evidence. So here's an opportunity to build it. And then lastly, wilderness and adventure activities, which has a high impact on crime and violence, but albeit it's low and moderate impact on reoffending. So, and also a high impact on behavioural difficulty. And again, this is something that if you are applying, please, in any of those brackets, I would say do check out the toolkit. There is loads of information and that can help you strengthen your application, but I won't steal colleagues' thunders. So I'm going to pass on to Sarah, who's going to talk to you more about the actual round itself.
Thanks, Caleb. Really appreciate it. So I'm going to look at what we're going to fund in this round, look at our eligibility criteria and what we're really keen in investing in for this grant round. Thanks, Caleb. So with any grant round, what you'll be aware of, I think this is our 5th themed grant round now, not including our other grant rounds that we have put out there. And hopefully what you'll be starting to see now as we start to put these rounds out, we have a clear scope of who we want to work with in each of the rounds. And that's really important for us. And it's something I'd really want potential applicants to take note of, that we want projects and interventions to show us how they clearly attend to the young people who we want to support within this round, which primarily are those who are aged 10 to 18. They're already involved in the youth justice system, either in a custodial or community-based setting, or are considered at risk or involvement of youth offending. This could be in multiple ways, really. So it could be at an individual level, a family level, a geographical level. When we talk about geographical levels or geographical regions or areas, you may be familiar with the phrase hotspots, so potentially offending hotspots or crime hotspots. But we're also interested in young people who may be affiliated with groups who have been involved in crime and violence, and potentially trafficking as well. We tend to not use the word gangs, but again, for those of you who may not be used to the word groups, that could be those young people who are affiliated with gangs. We're also interested in those young people who've been excluded from school or who have been affected by serious violence and or criminal or sexual exploitation. But that's both as a predator and also as a potential victim, because we know there's links within both of those areas. So again, I would just really emphasise the need to take note of who we're really looking for within this round and take that into account if you're putting an application together, and really think through how you're going to meet the needs of those young people. Thanks, Caleb. So what we'll fund? So Caleb did a cracking job of giving an overview of the definitions of positive activities. And I think you're aware that positive activities could have been really broad. There could have been many activities that we've looked at. And we've had to do some work through our toolkit and the evidence, wider evidence that is out there, to really think about where do we think we could make most impact with this grant round, and what does that look like in practice. So as you know, we've already talked about the sports, the arts, wilderness and adventure activities, and touched on standalone and plus. But what do we actually mean by that? So we know that positive activities can be in and of themselves the intervention. So it could be a delivery of, I don't know, for example, 6 months of football on the Mugger in various different areas where young people congregate, and it's being delivered by an organisation at a regular basis with trained individuals. That in and of itself is being used as the intervention to engage with young people. But there can also be times when sport is used as a hook. So often we see interventions or projects, and the same with the arts, where they may put on maybe a DJ session or something around dance, or something around boxing. And that's the hook to bring someone in, where you may be able to do some CBT with them, maybe some mentoring with them, and maybe even look at things like employment and education as well. So we're really interested in both approaches. What we're also interested in is a third approach, which is any organisation or set of organisations that may be able to offer the two. So that's a potentially standalone offer and the plus offer. So it's possible that an organisation could offer the positive activity for a young person in and of itself to engage with, but it's also possible that organisation could offer that young person the plus offer. So the activity in and of itself, and whatever the additional activity may be as well. We are interested in all of those. What we ask for is just a clear understanding of what the offer is, so we can really distinguish of what is a standalone offer, what does the plus offer look like as well? Delivery across all of these elements and all of these areas can be up to 24 months. What I would say is really think about how quickly you believe you could get to the outcomes of your project itself. So the reason I say that is, as a What Works Centre, we have a life course of 10 years. We're 4 years in, so we work really hard to work with projects and evaluators to really challenge ourselves to say, how soon could we find out whether this works or not? So really think through, okay, 24 is the backstop in terms of 24 months as a maximum, but where do we really think we might see change, and what might that look like in terms of our application? Thanks, Caleb. Super. So moving on next to what are we most interested in when it comes to understanding the changes we're wanting to make? I don't know whether many of you have been onto our website lately, but if you have, you'll see we've got a fantastic interactive infographic and supported documents around what we call our outcomes frameworks. Now, our area of work, working in youth violence, we cut across many different sectors, and there are loads of different outcomes we could really kind of focus on. We've really spent a lot of time figuring out what are our core primary outcomes that we're primarily interested in, but also what are our secondary outcomes as well. So any outcomes that we present to you through our themed grant rounds or other grant rounds are aligned to our outcome framework. So if you don't see something that isn't on there, it doesn't mean to say we don't think it's not important. It's just for our remit and the things that we're most interested in, we believe that this is where we have the most understanding and best potential to make change. So from a primary outcomes perspective, we would really like interventions or potential applicants to focus on one of the primary outcomes. So that could be offending behaviours in terms of violent crime or non-violent crime, so victim of crime, behavioural difficulties, and drug and alcohol use. We do have the specific definitions of those. I do really suggest that you go and have a look at our outcomes framework to give you more context, but I'll give you a bit of an overview about what we mean with each of those outcomes, just so you're really clear. So if we look at violent crime linked to offending behaviour, what we mean by that is criminal acts involving harm against another person, such as assault, robbery using threat or force, or homicide. If we're talking about non-violent crime linked to offending behaviour, that's criminal behaviours that do not involve violence against another person. So that could be shoplifting, graffiti, selling illegal drugs, those type of activities. In terms of victim of crime, what we mean by that is having experience or being a victim of different types of crime. So it's quite broad in that aspect, but we'll link to the various activities related to crime that we've already discussed. But it does cover both perpetrator and a victim as well. Behavioural difficulties. So in particular, we are really interested in something called externalising behaviours. And that's generally categorised as disruptive and aggressive behaviour that we may see in young people. And then finally, from a primary outcome perspective, drug and alcohol use. This is essentially, from our perspective, the problematic use of drugs and or alcohol that results in negative and harmful consequences to the self or others. Thanks, Caleb. As I mentioned, we also have secondary outcomes as well, and there's a number of secondary outcomes we are also interested in for this grant round. And we think really hard about which outcomes are most pertinent for the round. So if you do go onto our website and you look at our outcomes framework, you'll see, I think there's about 30, 35 in total that may be on there. And that's because we appreciate some outcomes are better for different rounds. Generally, our offending outcomes will be first or front and foremost of everything we do, but there will be a range of secondary outcomes that feed into those or that can support those as well. So the ones that we are most interested in for this grant round are around building and maintaining relationships, community connectedness, opportunities for education, employment and training, goals for the future, positive and pro-social identity, self-esteem, and regulating and managing emotions. I'm not going to give you the definitions for all of those because you'll have a lot of me speaking at you, but we do have those in our outcomes framework, and I would really encourage you to have a look at those and really think through what that means for you and your project. And again, the primary and secondary outcomes, they're the ones that we are particularly interested in for this grant round. So really thinking hard about how your project or intervention aligns to those is going to be key. Thanks, Caleb. So then looking at the eligibility criteria, if you've been through some of our processes before, in terms of our application form, what you'll know is we have a two-stage process initially. The first stage is going through eligibility set questions before going in to fill out the application form, because there would be nothing worse than filling out a really detailed application form and then realizing you're not eligible for it. So we ask a set of questions that will allow you to understand whether the grant round is right for you. So the things we're particularly interested in, of course, is making sure that your programme operates in the areas we're most interested in. And as you know, we cover England and Wales. The type of organisation is particularly important. So you need to be a registered organisation or a statutory body. The age of young people is really important. And I would also ask you to go back and really have a look at the wider kind of characteristics of the young people we want to work with as well. Making sure that your project delivers the interventions that we're most interested in. So it's those lists of positive activities, either standalone or with the hook or both, but being really clear which one it is. Making sure that you align to the outcomes we've just identified. Making sure you're already delivering your project. So some people have fantastic ideas about new projects and what they could look like. We're not the type of funder that would fund programme development. We're the type of funder that would take a programme when it's been through that stage, had a bit of testing, and then it's ready to be delivered. And I think that's really important, because the type and stage of evaluation that we fund wouldn't be fit for that type of project, and it wouldn't be fair to put them through that. You have the potential and capacity to reach at least 350 young people. Now, Tanya's going to go into this a bit more about some of the numbers when she goes into the evaluation slides. But based on feedback from existing grantees and past applicants, we've tried to be as clear as possible from the outset with this round in terms of numbers of young people we want to reach. The numbers themselves are indicative, but you'll see in the guidance there is a range, with 350 being the lowest range. That's really important, because we believe, based on what we've done so far, anything below that wouldn't allow us to detect impact against the outcomes we're most interested in. Finally, being able to look at and be prepared to work with an independent evaluator. That's super, super important for us. We're here, our purpose is here to be able to understand what works, and to do that we have to have an evaluation partner. The independent bit is super important because it makes the evaluation more rigorous, and I think that's really important to know. I can see someone's got their hand up, and I think I've come towards the end of my section, so happy to take questions.
Super. John Holden, please.
We just need to disable mics, so I'm just going to allow John's mic. John, can you speak?
I can now, thank you. I was
Thank
saying
you,
I'm
John.
on mute. It was just a quick question, and it's reference your last slide. So my name's John Holden. I'm the head of Cleveland's Violence Reduction Unit. Does a violent reduction unit count as a statutory body? In other words, can we apply outside of the OPCC? So that's all. You're nodding heads, just answer my question, so thank you.
Yeah, and we're already funding a number of VRUs as well, John. So yeah, we do that.
Brilliant, thank you.
Super. Jade Hibbert, please.
Thank you. Hi. Just a question around the point that was made around the service already being delivered. Is there a limited or a cap for how long that service has already been delivered for it to be eligible for this service, please?
There's not necessarily a cap per se, but normally what we would look at is we would like to have a project as run at least 6 to 12 months would be like a nice kind of time frame. Ideally, you'd want the programme to have gone through at least one cycle of delivery, which is really important for us, so we can see and understand what that delivery looks like. So I wouldn't necessarily give too many hard and fast rules, but we normally say an intervention that's been delivered for more than 6 to 12 months would be our preference.
I'm really grateful. Thank you ever so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Jade. And we'll take one more from Joa. If I pronounce it wrong, please tell me how to pronounce it, by the way. I think you've got ability to.
I've just disabled your mic, so you should be able to speak now. Nope.
No, nothing coming through, Joa, unfortunately. Do you want to just send it, put it into the Q&A, and then we'll see if we can pick it up there. And failing that, Rashid. Yeah, so you'll have to unmute yourself, Rashid, now, and I think you could talk. Oh, it's gone back to, that's not worked. Rashid, please, if you can, if you put it in the Q&A, we'll pick it up. And that was it. Just for purpose of time, any questions that we can't pick up now, we'll try and pick up in the Q&A as well. So I'm going to hand over to Tanya, who's going to take us through the YF evaluation and working with us. Sorry, you look like you're coming in.
Yeah, sorry, I was just about to say, I think our chat's turned off. So if we could turn our chat on, Kaylin, would we be able to turn our chat on? I think that's why people haven't been able to put questions in.
I think if people can add questions in the Q&A slot,
Okay.
that would be easiest if that's okay. And then we'll get through the questions at the end, if that will work.
Fantastic.
Thanks. So just keep adding them whenever you
I
like,
can see
guys, and
some
we'll
of them.
definitely get through them.
Yeah.
Super. What have I done there? I don't know what that is. I'm not doing that because I know that's not going to be favourable to me. So, okay, Tanya, over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Caleb. And if I'm able to, I might take control of
Great.
the slides. Is that
Yes.
possible?
Allow. Let's see if this works. This is snazzy. Oh yeah, I can see your face in a little arrow. It's great.
Okay, great. All right, thanks so much, everyone. So I'm just going to chat you through the YEF approach to evaluation and what that means for you when you're applying for the Positive Activities grant round. So as Caleb mentioned earlier, the YEF is a What Works Centre. That means we're set up to fund good work and to find out what the impact of that is in order to have the best possible impact on young people and build a movement to put the best practice, into its own. So that is to say that when you are, or if you are successful in applying to the YEF, you will be paired with an independent evaluator who undergoes the most robust evaluation of your project. And the YEF has a very unique approach to how we undertake these collaborations. And what you can see on your screen there is the two elements of a YEF funded project, which we see as two parts of an indivisible whole. So that is, there is no project without an evaluation, and there is no evaluation without a project. So the evaluation really wraps around the project. It provides, monitoring and evaluation of the efficacy of that project, which we believe has promise. So there are many benefits to this for you as grantees. But really why we're doing this is we want to provide evidence-based practice, the best possible evidence, that is, for children and young people. And this is why we think conducting an independent evaluation alongside our funded projects is the best way to make a change for future generations of children and young people and ensure that they are getting access to the most beneficial services. And I'm speaking to people who are here to do the same thing because you all work tirelessly to build these outcomes for young people. So we're here to measure the impact tangibly and provide an evidence base for that. So I'm just going to talk you through what that evidence base might look like and how we get there. So first of all, why evaluate? Well, we believe that in order to provide the best care for children and young people, that means we need to learn about what works, for whom, when, and how. So to break that down, on positive activities, we're interested in finding out which positive activities work, for who, as in what groups of children and young people, thinking particularly about racial equity, thinking about socioeconomic status, thinking about gender, all of these different intersectionalities. And what is the best dosage of an intervention? How long should an intervention be delivered for? And how is it delivered? So these are all questions which are uncovered by an independent evaluation, and really providing you that third point there. One of the reasons we evaluate is to make sure we're building this evidence base. And that second point there, the evidence base can then be used by you and other practitioners to improve future programmes and make a really convincing case for children, families and potential funders. The other 2 points, you know, it goes without saying really, we're all in the room because we want to improve the lives of children and young people. But we can't assume that programmes aren't harmful if we haven't actually measured their impact. Are they beneficial or not? So we see that as absolutely essential. And finally, we want to share the best practice for what works with other practitioners and with change makers, which is Caleb's job. So what does an evaluation look like on positive activities? As Sarah alluded to earlier, we are really interested in funding projects that have some existing idea of the impact they're having. And this could come in a variety of forms, which I'll come back to in a second. But just to look at this slide, which we've borrowed from our colleagues at the Early Intervention Foundation, there are lots of different evaluation designs from the bottom there to the top in the blue. And as you can see, what we're interested in for positive activities is projects that are ready for a pilot to understand the initial kind of your past feasibility. You know that this is an acceptable project, but we want to understand, is it possible to actually evaluate this project? And there we will be looking at how we actually run an evaluation, how we measure impact, going up to that second rung there, which is testing for efficacy. Is it possible to measure the impact of the project? And going even further than that, asking what is the impact of this project? So it's really a pilot, efficacy, or effectiveness study, which we're seeking to fund through positive activities. And just to come back to my earlier mention there, if you're applying for positive activities, we'd hope that you'd have some understanding of this is the theory of change that underpins this project. We think it goes something like this, and we think that because of prior research, or we think this because we've done an internal pilot ourselves, or we've done some preliminary work. We've collected a little bit of evidence. We've got a good understanding. So you're really looking for YAF support to really take this evaluation to the next level. Now, there is just one caveat to 5, 6 and 7, these evaluation designs we're most interested in, and that is working in a youth custody or secure estate context. So you might have seen in our guidance to applicants that in positive activities, we are interested in the youth custody setting. So if you are a project that's conducting work in this setting, obviously that has a unique set of needs and requirements. So perhaps in this setting, we would consider a feasibility study instead. All right. So I mentioned that we conduct rigorous independent evaluations, but you might be asking, well, what does that actually mean? And it's a fair question. So just to talk you through what the YAF deems to be a rigorous evaluation, we have several principles which underpin our common approach to how we evaluate all projects. So what you can see there is we have certain standards which we deem rigorous, robust and reliable in terms of how evaluations are undertaken. So we mentioned we want an evidence base. And what we mean by that is we would like some sort of statistical measure of the impact on the lives of children and young people in one of our primary outcomes of interest. So that could be offending behaviour, violent or non-violent. It could be externalising behaviours, drug or alcohol use. What we want to do is to collect some measure of that outcome using pre, during and post, usually self-report measures from the children and young people themselves that are reliable. So they've actually been validated on hundreds, if not thousands of young people before. So we know they're measuring what we want to find out. And other key features of a YEF evaluation, we are predominantly interested in conducting randomized control trials, which I'm going to talk you through in a second. And this involves randomly assigning children and young people to the project that's being delivered that wouldn't have been delivered before. Now, all of this taken together really provides a robust and substantial piece of independent evaluation, which you as a grantee can take forward to the future of your projects, of your organisation, that we believe provides the best possible evidence for policymakers and those working in the field. All right, so Sarah alluded to our preliminary figures to give you an indication of the reach that we would expect for positive activities. And what we mean by reach is actually not the number of children and young people you would deliver to, but the children and young people you can reach who will then be assigned to either business as usual, so the statutory services that they would have otherwise received if the project had not been funded, and then another group who receive the project. So I just wanted to take an example to kind of articulate this a little bit more clearly. So let's have a look there at projects that are measuring non-offending outcomes. So this could be, for example, behavioural difficulties. If we took the minimum reach that would be required, so you could reach 350 children and young people who are eligible for your project, the independent evaluator would help you randomise this group to ensure that half of them continue to receive statutory services, business as usual. They are supported in some form that is different to the project that's being delivered, which is new, which we want to evaluate the impact of. So hopefully that kind of shows you visually, that difference between the number of reach. So we do need to reach 350 children and young people who are eligible, but we deliver to half of that number. And so if you were to take an offending outcome of 700, it would be 350 and 350 in the same kind of way. All right, so just to very briefly touch on youth custody settings, I mentioned that they have unique requirements. The reason being, we know that the population of children and young people in youth custody is far smaller. And we also know that during their time in youth custody, when the project is being delivered, we're not going to be measuring offending. So we're going to be measuring some other primary outcome, probably behavioural difficulties. So that says something about the kind of reach that we would expect. But we're also, as I said earlier, aware that we're more likely to be conducting feasibility or pilot, early pilot work in this setting. All right, I'm nearly done. This is my penultimate slide. Just to give you a kind of sense of where my team comes in this process. So you can see on your screen there, on the left-hand side, that kind of red area, we're right at the beginning. We hope that after this workshop today, you'll be making an application and you would then proceed through the assessment of the project itself and shortlisting and an interview. And all projects go through to our Grants and Evaluation Committee for approval. Now, in that green section, you can see the second stage, which is where approved projects go through to the next stage and my team come in. And essentially what happens here is we pitch these successful projects to our evaluator panel, which is a group of about 45 independent higher education institutions and organisations who conduct rigorous evaluation research. And basically they bid through a competitive tender to evaluate your project. They're then partnered with you. And this is where we get to the really exciting part, which is so unique about our work here at YEF. It's the opportunity to collaborate with the independent evaluator on what we call co-design. So this is where your unique blend of project and evaluation expertise comes together to form that cohesive whole and to think about developing a final proposal, which will then be submitted and presented to our Grants and Evaluation Committee for a final review. So I hope that gives you a flavour of what you can expect from the timeline. And if you are interested in looking at any more information regarding our evaluation approach, we've got tons of goodies on our websites, including a video, and you can also see what kind of evaluations we're currently undertaking. We've got some really exciting work. All right, I'll pass over and see if we've got any questions. Thank you.
Super. Caitlin, do you want to read out some questions for us that we can answer? Thank you.
So Sarah's very helpfully been going through and answering your questions as they come along. So at the moment, unless anyone, I think we do have a couple of raised hands from Rashid. Do you still have a question for us, please? You're muted, by the way. I think you should have the ability to unmute yourself. That's okay, we can come back to Rashid. In the meantime, we have a questions just come through from Lindsay. So Lindsay, you can unmute now if you like.
Hello, thank you. I just wanted to ask with regards the evaluation that would be done. The YEF has, when I've spoken to other people around the country that have done YEF projects, there's sort of been a minimum, there's been an expectation it will be delivered as a randomised control trial, which is very exciting, and something that's always would be great to be involved in. However, I know there's been some challenges and resistance to doing that in this sphere. So I wondered if that was the line that you were expecting to take, or if you found creative ways to get around that and some of the challenges that you've had with randomized control trials in the criminal justice system in your previous 5 themes of work.
Tanya, I think Sarah, you might have some thought on this as well, but Tanya, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. Thanks, Lindsay. Yeah, so our approach to evaluation, as I outlined, is through randomisation. So using randomised control trials or quasi-experimental designs. That is the approach that we take. We believe it's the most rigorous and reliable way to rule out any other factors that could be causing change in the outcome of interest. So we want to be sure it's definitely the project that is having this impact. That's how we can produce the best possible evidence for children and young people. I don't know, Sarah, if you want to come in there at all.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is, Lindsay, is just around people's perceptions of a randomised control trial. And often, and I was replying away there to someone who was asking about randomised control trial, there's a perception that we're withholding something from a control group. So
Yes.
half will get something fantastic and half won't get anything. That's not our approach. What we actually look at is we look at what we call the funded project, so the thing that we're most interested in testing, versus you may hear it being called business as usual, what's delivered in the absence of your project. And that can be many things. And part of our process we go through is called co-design with those applicants who get further down the line. And we figure out what is that thing. So what we're then testing is the new project, or the project we're testing with the F, better, worse, the same as what would be delivered if that project wasn't around? And that's the question we're trying to answer. And I think going through that is really important. I think the other thing to note is often we get asked about how ethical is it for a young person not to receive the new project. And my question is, how do you categorically know it's effective for all the young people that we're interested in working with in this cohort, in this funding round? Because actually we don't have that level of evidence yet. That's why we're doing this round. And we're doing young people a disservice if we don't figure out what works best for who in what environment, and therefore put money in that. And yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, some other examples we could use around projects like Scared Straight, for example. Lots of money was initially going into that was being delivered, and then actually it underwent evaluation, and we found out that probably that amount of money shouldn't be put in, because either it wasn't effective, and in some instances it had negative effects. So I think it's taking people on the journey with us, Lindsay, and it can be tough, but it can be done. And we do work with a lot of yachts, a lot of local authorities, a lot of charity organisations as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So when you had the example where you had the pure activity delivering and then the added on bit, and you were saying some projects might be able to deliver both. So for that, there would be the control, there would be the standard, and then there would be the plus model. So it would be sort of a three-way bit.
Yeah, potentially, yeah. And that's some of the stuff that we would kind of work through, but absolutely it would likely be a 3-arm trial, which in and of itself would be interesting.
And just to clarify as well around the so we are in UVRU just in year one, so we've had a number of projects that we funded for a shorter period in year one towards the end, and that's some of them have got history of their own, and we've just funded part of it, or they've carried it on, but some of them we just literally ran as small pilots for proof of concept and things like that. So you're not, what I'm understanding from what you've said before in those examples that we're given is they don't have to be things that are actively running sort of as business as usual almost at the minute, as long as you can explain and justify how you've sort of done the proof of concept bit already, then it would potentially be eligible for consideration.
Yeah, so if you've tested it out, you've done your development, you've tested it out, and through the pilot it looks like it's got promise, yeah, we would totally be up for that. It's just where it's something that's brand new, that's never been tested before, that we just wouldn't really be able to pick up, or has only been running for a few months.
Yeah, okay, that's great, thank you.
No worries. Just before moving on slightly, I know there's another question just here, which I was kind of trying to type away at, but I was multitasking really, really badly. And they were just asking around when we talk about delivering half of the young people will receive the intervention and half will receive business as usual. And what does that mean in terms of control group funding? We fund the delivery of the project, so the intervention itself. Business as usual normally runs as is, so we wouldn't be funding that delivery. What we may fund is where there needs to be additional activities like data collection within the control group. So they would be things that we would be able to look to support, but business as usual would run as is, so we wouldn't fund the delivery of business as usual, but we would fund the delivery of the project intervention itself.
Super. Thank you so much, Sarah, for those points of clarification. And we got a couple more questions and then we'll move on. Tracy, if we come to you first, I think you're going to be, your mic's going to be enacted and then you just put yourself off mute.
It's been allowed, so you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you.
Thanks, Caleb.
Thank you, Caleb. And Tracy, you're not off mute, by the way, if you are speaking. I don't think it's working. Let's move to Aurelie. I hope I'm saying your name right. So we will allow you off, and then now, if you unmute yourself, yeah, great. I think you're in. Super.
Yes, I mean, hi, thank you. That I was the person with the question about funding half. When my question is, when you say BAU, do you mean things that happen outside of the funded organization? So things that we're not responsible for?
It really depends. It really depends. So there are some instances, for example, where we have a project that's being delivered, but the alternative is another statutory service, which isn't within that organisation, but that's what young people would ordinarily receive. There are other instances where an organisation does offer business as usual versus the other intervention. They would be the things we would have to explore. They would be the things that we would have to get the project to work really closely with the independent evaluator to really explore. And the reason that's important, and it's probably just worth noting, is the project has to be different enough from the business as usual for us to be able to test them, because if they're two similar things and they're very, very similar, then it's unlikely that we're going to see any impact or any difference. So it's really important that we are able to figure out what does business as usual look like, and is it sufficiently different from the new project.
Sure. And business as usual could be nothing.
We generally don't go down the route of nothing. So our approach is never to withhold anything from a young person.
But if if the target is currently receiving nothing versus our project.
Well, this is what I was just about to go on to explain, that if they're not receiving anything, and it gets slightly complicated with this, and it would be something that the evaluator would have to pick up. We can talk about active control groups, which is where we would potentially put something in place, but we would really have to figure out what that would look like in practice, but we would never say that somebody doesn't get anything at all. So it's just looking through what that is, and often there is business as usual in places where people don't think there is.
Right.
It's just we have to really hunt it out and figure out what that looks like. Not in all cases, but sometimes.
Yeah. So going to school could be business as usual.
We can't really necessarily give you. I
No,
can't give you
okay.
specifics on that at this point because I don't know what the context is. We would
Yeah.
go into that in more detail if you were to get through to the latter stages.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Super. Just in terms of, yeah, Tanya, please come in, and then I think we'll move on just because of time.
Yeah, just to really quickly, somebody in the chat was asking about arts organisations who are unable to deliver or reach 350 as a minimum. It was just to let you know that there is a link on the first part of our application to sign up to a YF arts organisation list. That's to be considered for potential future opportunities that we might have to fund what's called a multi-site trial. So if you think that you're not going to be able to partner, or that this traditional funding route isn't for you, please do have a look at that on our eligibility criteria of the form, and we'll be in touch if any opportunity does arise.
Excellent.
Cordelia, if you could just pop your question in the Q&A chat, we'll get that answered for you just for time, if that's okay, please.
Yes, please. That's the quickest way with 7 minutes remaining on the clock. Well, thank you so much for so much of your different questions. I hope you got the answer you need. We do have some addresses at the end of it, but hopefully we're given enough for you to go away and think about in that respect. So let's talk about how you apply, and that will be back to Sarah for this part. I'm not sure if you want to take control or you just want me to click through.
I'll allow you to use your silky skills, Caleb, and keeping me on track with the slides. Thank you very much.
Thank
So, how do we assess the applications, and therefore what should you be really aware of when you're answering the questions? Now, what you'll notice is if you've applied for funding before, we're pretty consistent with our assessment criteria, but we do make iterations based on feedback and things we learn. And this is what we have done this time. So we have 7 assessment criteria that's split into 2 broad buckets. One bucket is looking at, is it a well-planned project? Do we know what your project is, and is it likely to lead to the outcomes that you suggest? And then the next bucket is, does it have strong evaluation potential? Can we evaluate it in the way that YEF would like to evaluate it? And that's really important to us, for us to be able to move projects forward. Thanks, Caleb. So if we look at a great plan, what are we actually looking for, and what are the things that we want to pick up? So a worthwhile outcome is really thinking through the outcomes that we've just previously showed you in terms of primary outcomes and secondary outcomes. Primary outcomes are always going to be our main focus and the things we really want to look towards, but we also appreciate there will be some secondary outcomes as well. If they are not on the list that you've seen in the PowerPoint or in the guidance, then they're not. It doesn't mean to say they're not important, but for this grant round for us, they're not going to be as important as those projects who are focusing on the ones that are our main attention for this grant round. Equally, within the application form, it's unlikely, although there may be another box, I don't know in this particular grant round because I haven't done the detail on building the form, but you won't likely be able to select any other outcomes than the ones we're interested with this. You really need to think through what your outcomes are. Do they truly align to your activities? 2, are you able to deliver, or is it able to be delivered in a way to achieve the outcomes that have been proposed? What does that mean in practice? Okay, so do the set of activities that you have within your project, are they likely to lead to change in your outcome? Does it make sense that by delivering A, B, and C, outcome 1 is going to change? And that's really important to us, because if we don't see a link between the activities and the outcome, then actually it doesn't connect, it doesn't link, and therefore it's not a project that we're likely going to fund. Number 3 is able to engage the right type of young people. So what we're looking at is, can you reach, and are you aiming to reach the type of young people we're most interested in for this grant round, which we've gone through in one of the earlier slides and is in the application guidance? And how likely are you to be able to engage with them well? That's really important to us, because A, we have a strong focus on who we want to really support within this grant round, and we want to know that you can support them and have history in supporting them. Or if you haven't had history in supporting them, you have really good experience through partners or strategies in place to be able to reach and work with them. But also, we know most of the groups of young people we work with are those with real complex needs and unmet needs, and therefore often the trickiest to retain within a project. And we want to know you've thought about those. Number 4, able to deliver at the required scale. So for us, as you will have seen, the numbers we want to reach, we're wanting to be able to understand as an organisation, either as a lead with your key partners or as a consortium, can you reach the 350 plus young people for us to be able to deliver this project? But can you do it in a way that's appropriate and sustainable to you as a lead, or you as a lead on your partners and consortium? Because the last thing we want to do is to put you through something that absolutely breaks you, because that's not what we're here to do. So we really need you to think through, what does that scale look like? Thanks, Kaylee. Existing evidence. So do you have evidence of promise? Do you have some prior evaluations that you've done of your projects? Some of you have mentioned in the questions, we've done some evaluations or we've found some change against outcomes, but it might not specifically be the offending ones you've got. That's fine. Tell us what you found and tell us why you think that might link to offending. We're really keen to understand what existing evidence you've got. What I would say is just be mindful of not uploading, for example, text messages or sound bites from people who may say they've had a really good time on the project. That's great, but we get that many applications that we can only really look through kind of strong evaluation type reports or insight reports, or even if you have access to any administrative reports. For example, sometimes schools collect data on behaviour and they're able to provide that and show change over time. The next one, which is also very important to us, is it evaluable? So our focus will always primarily be to have a randomised control trial as our preferred method. And we will be looking through the lens of the assessments through, can we evaluate this in the way that we want to? We do take into account other robust designs, but there will always be experimental designs, and we will always push hard for a randomised control trial. So understanding, can you reach the numbers? Is it clear what the project is? Are we confident that we might have enough numbers to detect impact against the outcomes we're most interested in? They're the types of things we will be looking at. And then finally, likely to lead to change. If we find your project works brilliantly, can we scale it up? Can we replicate it elsewhere? So how do we pick it up and take it elsewhere to reach more numbers? And either for us to fund it further to do effectiveness trials or scaling up and understanding whether it works at scale, or more importantly, looking forward, and when the change team and our change team are looking at change in policy and practice, people knowing that they could access your project as a potential commissioning opportunity and you could deliver it at scale if needed. Thanks, Caleb. I'm aware of time, so I'm going to try and skip through some of my slides a bit more quickly, but this one's really important, so I don't want to skip this one. Why are we here? So we're here to reduce crime and violence in young people. We know a number of young people are disproportionately represented in the youth justice system. And we know that young people from marginalised backgrounds are either overrepresented in these systems, but also sometimes find it really difficult to access some of the key projects, interventions or services that are available. Our role is to really understand how we can best serve these young people. What can we do to try and challenge that status quo? What can we do to try and meet the needs of marginalised groups? And there's some really exciting learning opportunities through that. Can we work with organisations who are able to really clearly articulate how their projects can be racially equitable, inclusive, and diverse, and we will really be digging into that in our applications. That will require you understanding who you work with now and what your demographics look like, who you intend to work with, and being honest if there's things you want to change and get better at. I think that's the main kind of things for the commitment piece, but the only other thing to say is we also have a commitment to what we call our Black, Asian and minority ethnic led organisations. And for us, that's those with a leadership percentage of 50% or more who identify as coming from a marginalised group. That's really important to us because it's not just about reaching the young people that we're here to serve, but it's also making sure that we can work with organisations who are more likely to reach them as well and build that capacity and diversity within the systems and sectors we're working with. Thanks, Caleb. Using our online portal, I'll quickly go through this. It's pretty self-explanatory. What I would say is this is done through something called form assembly. Just some top tips. If you're saving your application to go back to it, please make sure you check your email address and your password. We can go back and reset it for you, but I know being on the other side of the fence, putting applications, the angst you feel when you've submitted something or you're working on something and you can't re-access it. I would give another top tip. Although our IT works fabulously 98% of the time, there have been times where people have worked directly in the form, they haven't saved their answers and something's happened with IT and they've lost their answers. Please do your answers either in a Word document or Excel first to save yourself any pain of us not being able to retrieve it at the back end, should we not be able to. And then just really think through the application details that you're really sending to us and be clear, punchy, but as detailed as possible, which I know is slightly contradictory, but it's a real art of giving us as much detail in as minimum amount of words as you possibly can is always helpful. I think they're the kind of main points. If you do have any questions, please feel free to email us, I think at grants@youthendowmentfund.org.uk if you have any technical issues. Over to you, Caleb.
Thank you. So we'll stick around to I'll ask some questions if people got a few minutes, then great. But just to let you know about our resources, the YEF Toolkit is an opportunity for you to find out much more about what are the things we've looked at so far and what are their indicated impact on violence. So we give that a rating, and the toolkit is the which guide to youth violence. It's really helpful. 23 approaches on there at the moment. Mentoring's one. Pre-court diversion's another, for sporting activities another. So do take a moment to look at that because it can help really frame to help you articulate your application and make it stronger as well. So key dates: applications opened on 5th of April. They close on the 26th of May. The shortlist applicants will be informed in mid-June later this year, and then there'll be an interview also in June, and these will be chalked into the diary and not changeable in terms of just getting our team together to be able to meet with you to find out more about your program. And then there's an initial approval in July 2023. Then we kick into what's called a theory of change workshop, which takes place in the winter time, in the September, October time. A code design workshop, which is where we interrogate what you've said in your application to make sure that we have a robust opportunity to fund a great project and learn loads. And so you'll see there the code design workshop, and that's an opportunity for us to work together and become a bit more of a dream team. Then we get final approval in January 2024, and then delivery begins in February 2024. If you've got any further questions outside of the one or two that we'll pick up now, if we've got the chance, please do email grants@youthendowmentfund.org.uk. I really can stress and will stress that the application guidance has pretty much 95 to 99% of the information you need. Please take your time to comb through it. There is a FAQ element in it as well, so there's much more for you to have. And if you're kind of jittering and not quite sure, you can't get your finger on it, please do message us in that result. I'll stop sharing and we'll take a couple more before we go. So Lindsay, you've been patient with us. We will have you as the last question.
Oh, amazing, thank you. So when you're going through this, is your preference that it's just one activity that's being piloted and that's for the whole cohort, that the number that was that you've specified as a minimum? Or for example, would you be open to, if you've got multiple things? So for example, we've got a really promising music activity and a really promising sports activity. Do you do one application that would refer sort of randomly to both, or potentially that way? Or would you expect us to do one application per opportunity?
I think that's a really, really good point. I mean, I don't know what you think, Tanya. I would say do one application, but I would identify that it could be done as a collective or they could be done individually, because that gives us choices then. So that would mean we could take it in and of its own right as the arts and the sports project together, or if we want to, we could decouple them. And we have been known to do that, Lindsay, where we've gone back to projects and said, you've identified 3 things, we're pleased you put them in there, but we're most interested in this. But rather than you doing 2 applications, I would talk about them both, but identify that they could run together, as you've said, or they could run as individual projects.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, we're just about at time. Jenny, last one, because we're gracious like that. Last one from you. So you're going to be allowed to speak, and then please take yourself off mute.
Thank you. Really appreciate you sneaking me in. So my question just built on that last one, because we would be working with a group of organisations, and I guess we have one organisation that would focus on sports and another one that would focus on arts. Would you therefore want one application that spoke to both of them, and then you could come back and advise which one you thought might work both?
I think probably yes, because I do think it would be a lot for you to do 2 applications. I mean, would you be looking at them to run separately anyway, or would you be looking at them as a combined project at any point, Jenny?
So they'd probably be running separately. I guess in theory we could have the group of young people who attended kind of both sports and the arts sessions. But I guess maybe that could be a conversation for further down the line.
Yeah, I mean, Tanya, what are your thoughts on that one? Are your thoughts? I mean, I'm just thinking of ease in terms of completing an application, but also trying to make sure that it's really clear about what it is. Do you think it would be better having 2 separate ones in that instance?
I mean, part of our assessment is the clarity of the intervention that's being delivered. So I think the only risk that you run in kind of amalgamating those 2 activities into one application would be that we can't actually delineate clearly enough between the 2. So if you do take that approach, I would strongly recommend kind of making sure you clearly signpost to when you're talking about arts versus sports. But if you, on reflection, actually think that one of them has maybe a stronger evidence base, or you've got more experience of delivering that one, you might consider instead just going with that one that's stronger. It's really difficult to say other than that, really. I hope that helps.
No, that's really helpful feedback. Thank you very much, both of you.
Yeah, and again, please read the guidance, criteria, see which is the strongest that fits. In that respect, we've not seen, I'm not sure about you, Sarah, but we've not seen 2 applications that kind of both end up in a good pocket in that respect. And our lessons learned are the ones that get the most focus, and the attention is what gets through. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to this time. Cordelia, I'm so sorry. We're probably going to have to close it here, but please do message us at grants@youthendowmentfund.org.uk. Just want to say a huge thank you for turning up and for listening to us. Hope you've got the answers that you need to make a strong application, and all the very best. Just want to say thank you to my colleagues, Kaylin, Sarah, and Tanya, and from me and YEF, goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all for coming.